Okay, so I've imported your image, and by the way, this is such a great image to show a lot of interesting stuff about it. So I was really happy to be working on this one. So first of all, I use file place image because it's a JPEG, so you can't use import. You need to use file place image, and I always prefer to bring it in into the main window versus bringing it in after I get to the trace window because I want to see how big it is. Because if this thing is ginormous, I'm going to size it down so that it fits, in a more reasonable area. Now, one thing I didn't ask you, but you'll have the option. I'm only going to do a single trace on this, but you could, of course, do two different traces and crop these two separately if you wanted to. I am going to basically crop it just to get rid of all this excess space that's around here because it's just not necessary. So I'll be doing that in the trace window. So here's the image, and so again, I'm going to go right into the trace window. All right, I don't need ChatGPT. Not sure why that popped up. So normally your default is going to be Monochrome 127, and you probably found that regardless of when you kept trying to increase this, you still had problems. Let me go ahead and make this window much bigger so we can see things easier. And then, and also with the blackout, you don't want to use blackout because you would lose this middle part of the image. Now, one thing you could do possibly is find a sweet spot here, because if I go way too far up, well, one less than 255, you'll notice that then I'm getting a lot of kind of rough edges around the outside and on the inside. You can tell it's just like, well, 6,000 nodes. That's not good. So, and you can look for the sweet spot, which is going to be somewhere in between when it's bringing down these nodes. And for example, let's try it right here. Okay, well, that's too much. Let's go back to where I just was. One option is that you get to a point, and again, I'll go a little bit more, I think. What I'm trying to do is get it where it's not the outside. So one thing, you could possibly do is do something like this where you accept this, but then you turn on blackout, okay? And then you accept this. And of course, can be fixed with this. Is a straight line. You can just get rid of the nodes, which I'll do later. You can play around with that, and then you could end up with two traces. Because every time you have this prompt turned on, it's going to ask if you want to trace again, and you would just say yes, and you do one with blackout on, one without blackout on, and then you could get rid of what you don't need, just keeping the outside and then the inside from the other trace, if that makes any sense. But I found another way, which I really liked a lot. And the way I'm going to do that is instead of using monochrome, I'm going to come over to single color. And in single color trace, it's only going to trace just one color that identifies. And it happens to, in this case, it sees white first. However, and let's turn off blackout again. We don't want blackout in update preview. So I found that when I did this, I'm like really close to exactly what I want. It is going to add an extra cut line around the outside because it does that with JPEGs. It sees that as a white color that needs to trace, but that's easy to get rid of later. Super easy. And so then the thing is, do you get the trace that you want? Well, this is where you need to really zoom in and have a look. Also, before I do anything, I'm going to go ahead and crop it. So I'm going to come here to crop and get rid of that extra white space because otherwise I'll forget to do it. Okay. And then the other thing I'll forget to do if I don't do it right away is I will forget to add image layer because it doesn't do any good to crop it if you don't add image layer to create a new image. So now then I click on Update Preview, and now then I'm going to zoom in, maybe bring this down just a little bit so that I can look at these lines and see how they look. Now, the one thing I noticed, there is kind of some rough spots in here. Now, you have two options. You can attempt to clean this up right away, or you can wait till later. But the other thing I noticed is that in some places, and then I'm going to zoom in tighter and bring in my image. In some places, I can see that the cut line is really, really close, just a little bit of white there. Other places, it's got a bigger gap. And I really don't want to see a bigger gap in some places and not so much of a gap in others, because otherwise it's going to make it hard. You're going to be more likely to see the white that you don't want. So the trick to that one is this contrast. It defaults at 5, but as I increase this number up, it's going to incorporate more of a white color that's similar to this original white. Because what happens is this white just happens to be a little bit darker. So in order to capture that, I just need to bring this up. Let's bring it up to say 7. And it's very sensitive. So, don't go making it 50 or something. You'll end up with everything. So I'm just going to go up maybe 2 at a time and see what happens. And when I do that, now that I'm starting to see that it's getting much closer to that line, which is what I want. So again, you can keep tweaking it up. You don't want to go too far because then you might start getting some other problems, but that looks pretty good. And I can come back out again. And now you'll notice I see this stuff up here. Don't forget about that. That's easy to get rid of later, as is the stuff about this kind of this line here. This is going to be easy because this is a straight line. It'll be easy to clean up. It's more about just all these little dots. But the thing is, I'm getting this internal trace that is much harder. So again, let's come up here and have a look at it. And if I had just 1 or 2 like little problems down here, then you could go ahead and correct it here, like using the draw mask tool, which I'll show that just as a reminder. This draw mask allows you to erase and to add on to. The thing that's tricky is, especially with a single color, it can get tricky knowing whether or not you're supposed to be using foreground or background. So the best thing to do is just pick one and then come up and just click once and then click on update preview and see what happens. Now what happened is it added, see, that's a bigger cut line because it's still in red. So, I needed to be on background in this case. So now then I can make that a little bit bigger and I can come up and I can just start erasing all this right along here. And of course you want to be very careful. I'm going just right along this line here. And then when I click on update preview, you'll see that it disappears. There we go. I still got a few more here and here. Update preview. Now, the one thing to remember, if you inadvertently make a mistake in this window, you can't use undo. Undo doesn't work in this window. Don't use undo. Instead, what you want to do is you want to do the opposite. So if I should have been using foreground, just like I did, if I, for example, let's say I come down here and I do something like that, update preview, and I go, oh, I didn't mean to do that. Oops, I added a cut line. Then you just switch back and then just come over and cover it up. Okay, and then that will basically, now, notice it looks like, it erased something. No, it didn't. Don't worry about that. There's no red line. Don't worry about it. If you see white, that's okay. You just don't want to see a red line, okay? But anyway, so I'm just going to accept this because I'm going to show you how to do the editing just in the main window, which I think works out better here. So again, I've got my add image layer. I've cropped it. Let's zoom out. I've got this stuff, but I'm going to be able to fix that. And now then I just click on OK. Now, it may take a while because it's got all these little cut lines. That's okay. Just wait it out. Okay, this pops up and says, would you like to continue tracing? No, I'm done. Again, I could in that other circumstance, but not in this one. Okay, so now then I have my trace selection. Now you'll notice I don't see anything like dark and black. That's because of the white tracing. Instead of getting that really dark black layer, now then what I get instead is I end up with this tracing. Well, let me back up for a second. Remember, because I've done this tracing now, I've got a new print layer and a cut layer. So this original print layer, I'm going to delete it because now then I've also just helped reduce the overall file size, as we've discussed in previous videos. So that's a good thing. So now there's a smaller size file, and then this, and then of course I got this cut line. So what I prefer to do here is basically ungroup this at this point because I want to protect the print layer as much as I can. And then this cut layer, which I don't see anything, again, it's all colored in white because of the fact that I did white tracing. So I need to give the cut line a color, the stroke color. So I'm going to click on this white box and just give it a color so it'll show up. Okay. Also, I can go to preview and I can see what's going to cut. So I still have an outer box that's going to cut as well as the other stuff and all this junk. So I want to clean this up, obviously, and it's very easy to do. So what I do is go to Object, Break Apart, okay? And then I'm going to take this outer cut line and delete. And then I'm going to drag my mouse to incorporate this up. Now, don't come all the way down here because you'll get your internal cut there. You don't want that to get deleted, but you can otherwise come up here and select Encompass Large Sections and make sure you get any extra cut lines removed that you don't want. So any of those itty bitty little annoying shapes, okay? So make sure you get all those. And then the next thing is down here. Well, we kind of want to examine closer up. So let's zoom down here first, because I know this line down here, that's the one that was very bumpy. So this is where you can just come down here to your node edit tools, select that line, and then notice where where the line changes. Like this is one point, this is the other point. So I want all the nodes in between those two locations. So let me come down here and just select them all like that and hit the delete key. And then you can see if there's any more there and any more there. Just don't, get the ones at the end. And so that looks much nicer. So now you got a nice straight line. And you can examine the rest of it and make sure the rest of it, that the straight lines look good. Otherwise, we can come over and move into this area here. Now, this is the point where you will want to, let's go back to Control F. All right, let's come back here. This is where these two here, you might want to shrink them in because there still was a little bit of white showing. So you can take these, oops, let's come down here, make sure I just get those two things selected, not the boxes. And I'm going to go to Path, Offset Path. And this is where you can pick. Now I picked 0.025 centimeters, which should be enough. That's like 2.5 millimeters, probably more than it needs to be, maybe just 0.02, maybe 0.015. That's kind of a personal thing that you can play around with. And then I also pick rounded just because that'll help, reduce like excess nodes and stuff, make it just a little smoother cutting, and then click on OK. And now then, once I've got that offset done, now then let's come back and I'm going to select this cut line. Oh, let's go back now and merge these back together. Object, merge, and then it has no fill on it. That's good. So now that I can come over and I can turn on my print line and then zoom in and let's have a look at what it looks like. And it looks really good. Now, the thickness of the cut line can sometimes, keep you from seeing any white. So you might want to take this cut line, let's come down and select it, and then decrease the width on it a little bit. And now then you can see that it's going just inside your print line all the way around. So there you go. I think that covers everything I wanted to. Of course, later, like a half an hour later, I'll go, oh, I should have mentioned such and such. I tend to do that too. But anyway, again, this is a really good example. I really like this this particular image because it really shows some of the capabilities that aren't commonly used, but can be used to get exactly what you want in your particular cut.